All right, Sandy, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, welcome everyone to the April COG meeting. Sorry I wasn't here last month, but I hear it was a really good meeting, so I should skip more of them, it sounds like. I guess we'll start with, how about Kelly, you do some roll call?
Yeah, so as a reminder, if when I call out your name, if you have any community news to share, any big news in your area to share, feel free to do so. Brad. I see you.
Yes, I'm here and no new news.
Thank you. Harley. Connie?
Hey, Charlie, yeah.
Here, I'm here.
Yay. She wasn't able to connect to the last meeting.
You're right.
Sorry about that, Connie.
No problem.
Dan Brown.
Dan's here.
Dave Wynn.
Yep, I'm here.
Jason.
I am here and no news.
Joe.
Don't see Joe.
Mary.
I am here and I have a letter that I'd like to read that was sent to our agencies and that. It says Safe Walk Road Committee, March 22nd, 2023, to all agency, division, and department staff having involvement with water in Holly, Michigan. Members of the Safe Walk Road Committee have been informed that MPART, Eagle, MDHHS are going to be scheduling a town hall meeting to report on the contaminated Falk Road dump in Holly, Michigan, and results of activities from the $100,000 funding by the state of Michigan and Village of Holly testing in 2022. Additionally, there is expected to be a report on the contaminated fish from Rice and Bush Lakes in Holly, Michigan, and possible details on a fish advisory. On behalf of the Safe Walk Road Committee and all residents of Holly, Michigan, we are requesting that the meeting be scheduled in person in Holly, Michigan at a venue large enough to hold a crowd and have the capability of playing and recording media. So this can be shared with members of the community that are unable to attend in person. We also request that there be plenty of advance notice so that the municipalities of Village of Holly and Holly Township will have the opportunity to make more effort to reach their residents than they used for the MPART Eagle MDHHS Town Hall meeting held in May 2021. Since residents will already be gathered, we are also requesting that all agencies, all divisions and departments of agencies that are involved in any aspect of water and hydrology throughout the Holly, Michigan area come to share and educate on their area of expertise, but also come to learn from other agencies, divisions, and departments. Our group has been requesting this type of meeting for years from our agencies and politicians, including the town hall in May 2021. As residents, we are not familiar with all the agencies and departments that are involved. We are relying on the integrity and transparency of our agency staffs to share this letter with all necessary agencies, divisions, and departments, so that our residents can learn the current state of all water, including but not limited to the aquifers, the state of the waters of the state on and off the Holly Hills manufactured home community, the wetlands and the Shiawassee River that has been receiving effluent from the on-site wastewater treatment plant on Holly Hills manufactured home community for over 2 decades, and all other sources of water. We're also requesting a report on the $2.6 million Patterson Drain Improvement Project from the Oakland County Water Resource Commission. If there's any information that our group needs to FOIA prior to this meeting, please advise which agency and contact information. Thank you. Safe Hawk Road Committee, Mary Blanchard, Secretary. And to this point, we have not heard any response. And I stopped into the Village of Holly yesterday, and the village also, I don't believe, has heard a response. So thank you.
Wow.
Thank you, Mary. Patty.
Hi there. Yes, I'm here, and I would like to share that the construction has begun in earnest yesterday for our city water project. The water main is laying on my neighbor's property, and I see hydrants, and I'm very excited. So I would like to thank many of you on this call who had a piece, a part in that happening. We did receive a $5 million C2R2 grant to make that happen, and maybe there were others that I'm forgetting right now. I know there were others, but I would just want to let everyone know that we are on our way to getting safe, clean drinking water. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. Rick Burns. Brooke Radisky.
Here and no news.
Thank you, Rick. Tamara. Shalene.
Here.
Oh, and I do see Samara on, so she probably just couldn't get unmuted. Kelly.
She says she's having some tech issues, but she's here.
Thank you. Stacy. Teresa.
Don't see Teresa.
Tony.
Yeah, I'm here, and for whatever reason, I'm coming up as unknown user. I don't know why that is, and I can't fix it. And the only the only news that I have, and it really isn't directly from my community, just information to share on a related topic, and that's that in May, I believe it's 18th, 19th, and 20th, shortly after our next meeting, Alma College will be sponsoring the PBB at 50 conference to discuss the 50 years of history from the PBB contamination incident in Michigan. And there is, I believe, an online option if anybody's interested in attending. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Tony. And on my end, you at least show up, your name shows up. So I'm assuming
good.
everybody else sees the same.
Good.
Yep. Yep. And Kelly, if you can go back, I see Rick Burns is on. He probably just couldn't get, he's listed under Penny, but I'm assuming Penny is Rick.
Thank you. Lynn McIntosh. Not on. Lynn Knopf. Somehow I got out of order here. I don't know what's going on. Hey, neither one of them. Christina. Dan Burlingame. Dave Norwood. Elizabeth. Gail Mansowitz.
Nope.
Gail Dugan. Jeff Dutton. Jeremy Walsh. And please welcome John Voorhees. He's a new COG member. So we're excited to have him, and John, if you want to do a little introduction.
Oh, yeah, I'm new to this. It's my first time. Thank you, everyone. I'm really glad to actually see this kind of active participation and care about all of our environmental health, especially clean air and water and that sort of a thing. I live in the Belding area. I'm currently an active member of the Concerned Citizens for Clean Air and Water, and I live about a mile and a half away from the Pitch Sanitary Landfill, which is a known PFAS and VOC contaminant site, as many of you probably already know. I currently sit on the Solid Waste Planning Committee for Ionia County. I've done that since last December. And so I'm looking forward to being of service, and however much I can help, I'm here, and I'm happy to be a part of this team. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Welcome, John.
Justin? Ken Harvey? Laura Ogar? Leah? Lynn Knopf, she wasn't here. Margaret? Mike Foreman? And Pam McQueer?
I don't see Pam.
Bob Pataki? Sandy?
I am here. The only update we have in our area is they have clear cut the 30 acres or so of the Christmas tree farm. So it looks slightly like, now it looks like Jackson Prison meets nuclear war zone. But it will get better. I'm convincing everybody it will get better. So, and that is Penny here, right?
Yeah, apparently sorry, Penny, I completely misspoke there. So you're not representing Rick today then? Oops. Penny, can you unmute yourself or no?
Yeah, I accidentally well, not accidentally, I muted her because she was typing and I didn't want all of the. So Penny, if you want to talk.
I don't know. Can you get yourself to mute?
Gotta unmute yourself.
Yeah, it doesn't allow us to do it for you.
There
we
you
go.
Sorry, I thought I had done that already.
That's all right. Sorry, Penny, I thought you were signing in for Rick Burns. So I don't think that we have met before, but welcome to the COG.
Thank you.
Bill Burnett.
I'm present and looking at the house of the late circuit judge from Wexford County who ruled on the PBB case. It's right across the street from my house, and that was in the 70s when I was 14. I'm now 63, almost 64. So 50 years of history and other issues back then, similar to what we have here. And it's my neighbor who's gone now.
Wow.
He issued a landmark decision. And don't ask me to break it down.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming. Before we start on subcommittees, any things we want to hold up as great news? And just a reminder, if you're not talking, please mute. Any shout outs we want to give to people, or any great news we want to share? Aside from the fact that it's going to be 70 this week in Michigan and the snow is pretty much gone.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I tried. If nothing, then let's start out with subcommittees. Membership committee, who's going to speak? Anyone here from membership going to talk?
This is Mary, and unfortunately, we did not meet this month.
All right, that's all right. And again, welcome to John. Glad you're here. Feel free to ask questions as we go. Website review committee, do we have anything on that subcommittee?
Yes, we spent a lot of time just going over the website. John Reese was on the call and had a bunch of questions. And the newest item is the public drinking water was brought into the GIS map. So you can see all the public water supply samples there in hexagon. So it's not the exact, GPS location, but there's a wealth of information on the GIS site as far as surface water samples, and there's information now on all the drinking water samples. And that includes, even the small supplies like the high schools and things like that. So, we're encouraging everybody to look at the website and let us know what's working and what isn't working and what you'd like to see better. But I think there's really a lot of information there, and it's improved considerably over the last year as far as adding all those GIS layers. We're just curious what people are thinking when they try and navigate it. The drinking water section has information for public wells. It obviously doesn't have the public or the private well data, but it's got the information for labs, and the labs has been updated to include in-state and out-of-state laboratories, and then the carbon filtration information. So again, we're going to be looking at it, and then we want people on the COG to look at it too and let us know feedback on it.
That's great. So if everybody could take a few minutes over the next month and take a look at it then, so we can give feedback, that's good. It is an amazing resource if we could just figure out how to get people to use it. So Abby, you got your hand up?
Yeah, just a note on that. We launched the compliance data. So historically, last year we had the statewide sampling data for all the municipal supplies on the GIS layer. Now we have the compliance monitoring data, which is the ones that are coming in from each supply as they do their annual routine monitoring, either if they do it annual or if they do it quarterly or whatever their monitoring schedule is, that data will be posted. Just a note, you may find a few locations that are in the wrong spots. We're fixing it. We know it's an issue, but I was looking in the Rockford area and found the public supply well for Ellsworth, which obviously is not in West Michigan. So we know about that issue. I think we've got it almost fixed. It just needs to be re-uploaded, and we'll get that done here probably in the next week. So if you're surfing around, take a look. Definitely, if you see anything else, let us know. But that particular issue, I think we are in the process of fixing. So just wanted to highlight in case you guys looked at it and went, what the heck is going on here? So.
Great. Any other comments or questions for the website review committee? All right. Preventative measures subcommittee. Dave, I think that's you.
Yeah, thanks, Annie. Yep. I'm in the process right now of going through the current list of stuff that's out there. I'm in the process of looking at making sure that all the emails are the same, the links, the web links and everything else. Once I get that complete, then I'll get a meeting scheduled with the group, and we can talk about maybe a second phase and go further from there.
Excellent. That is another really good resource that somebody was talking about using. I think it was Gail Dugan, I think, was talking about using it in Otsego and how impressed everybody was. So make sure you use that if you're talking to other members. Engaging the public subcommittee. Did that meet today?
We did. I
Okay.
can start off, and I'd like to thank John, our new member, for joining in, as well as Rick and Samra, and also the graduate student Colleen joined in, and Brandon Thomas from DHHS. we'd also like to have any other members to join in. And, you know, we're still struggling some with the public notification document. Even though it was voted on, there's still some questions that remain. And I guess we'd like more input from members as to what we can clarify or that. And Rick especially is one of the people who has concerns about that. I don't know if you want to share anything, Rick, or not, but it'd be nice if more members were to tune into the Engaging the Public subcommittee if they're able. Thank you.
That meeting is just before this one, right?
That's
Like,
correct, 5 o'clock.
okay. Okay.
And
Yeah, Kelly
usually
always-
lasts for about a half an hour so people can break away and have a little bit to eat before this meeting.
Okay. All right. Any other subcommittees or any subcommittees we need to form and create?
We
All
had
right.
talked about doing a legislative subcommittee at one point, but I don't know if we're actually ready to go there yet.
Okay. I think we have talked about at what point do we talk to decision makers about what specific needs we have. So that would fit with that. All right. I guess we're moving on to the Eat Safe Fish program. And since it's warm out, we all feel like fishing. So it's timely. So carry it away, who's ever doing this one.
All right, this will be Brandon Reed, who is our toxicologist in the Eat Safe Fish program. And so Brandon, take it. Whoa, what happened to our slides?
Yep,
Take it
I'm gonna
away.
hand it over to Brandon. He wanted
he's
to
gonna
run his
navigate.
own slides. Yep.
Beautiful. Thanks, Brandon.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to take one thing off your load for today. Yeah, just get this shared up and I will get started. All right, how does this look? All good?
Looks good.
Looks
Yeah.
good.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So yeah, as was mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Eat Safe Fish program. My name is Brandon Reed. I'm a toxicologist at MDHHS, and I serve as the Eat Safe Fish program manager. The Eat Safe Fish program is Michigan's fish consumption advisory program. It is responsible for issuing recommendations on fish consumption for fish caught in Michigan, based on levels of harmful chemicals that can accumulate in fish. As an overview, I'll start off by briefly talking about the goals of our program. Then I'll dive into the process by which we establish fish consumption guidelines, from the collection of fish to the creation of the Eat Safe Fish guides. And last, I'll finish up with how we conduct outreach to the public about our guidelines and the potential risks of eating fish. So the goals of our program are first and foremost to promote safer consumption of fish from Michigan water bodies, to create consumption guidelines based on the health risks of eating fish that contain environmental contaminants like mercury, PCBs, and PFAS, and to provide Michiganders with the knowledge they need to make informed decisions about which fish and how much fish to eat. Next, I'll move into a discussion of our Eat Safe Fish guideline process. This process follows a general roadmap, the general roadmap of sampling and analysis, data evaluation, and issuing a guideline. The first step there, sampling and analysis, includes the collection of fish from water bodies in Michigan and how those fish samples are processed and analyzed into usable fish contaminant data. Michigan's fish consumption advisories are based on chemical levels in edible portions of fish. The fish that we use for our consumption advisories are primarily collected by the Fish Contaminant Monitoring Program, or FCMP. The FCMP is a program in the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, or EAGLE, that maintains a database of fish contaminant data from water bodies across the state. EAGLE also works with other partners to collect fish for contaminant analysis, including the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, and in particular their Fisheries Division, the U.S. Geological Survey, as well as community partners and tribal governments. After collection, fish are frozen until they can be processed by FCMP biologists. That processing involves collecting information like length and weight for each fish. Edible portions of fish are then removed and sent to the MDHHS laboratory. The edible portion is based on which part of the fish is eaten. So for most fish, this is the fillet of the fish. But for some fish, it's something a little bit different. In particular, rainbow smelt, the edible portion of those is basically the whole fish, except that the head's removed and then the guts are removed from the fish as well. And the reason that we test the edible portion of the fish is because that is the most representative of people's exposure. We want to know how much people are getting exposed to when they eat fish. So we want to test the part of the fish that people eat. Once fillets are received by the MDHHS laboratory, they are individually blended to form a paste that can then be analyzed for contaminant concentrations. The MDHHS laboratory quantifies several different chemicals and classes of chemicals for the purpose of informing fish consumption guidelines. These chemicals include mercury, PCBs, and organochlorine pesticides, which include DDT, its metabolites, DDE and DDD, and chlordane, as well as total dioxins, furans, and coplanar PCBs, the pesticide toxaphene, the metal selenium, and PFAS, which includes 39 different PFAS analytes, including PFOS. Currently, all fish tissue samples are tested for both mercury and all of those 39 PFAS analytes. Mercury is tested because it's ubiquitous in fish. It's found not just in Michigan, but in fish worldwide. And PFAS is tested as it is an emerging contaminant that we are trying to learn more about. Additional chemical analyses are then selected based on the location of the water body and the fish species. So some of these contaminants are more regional than others. For example, toxaphene and selenium are more commonly found from water bodies in the UP. So fish from the UP are commonly tested for those contaminants. Similarly, fish from Lake Huron and Saginaw Bay are usually tested for PCBs and dioxins due to the historical contamination in those water bodies. So the next step in the guideline process is data evaluation. During this step, Eat Safe Fish scientists review fish contaminant data to determine which consumption guideline is appropriate. The first step in the data evaluation process is to compare concentrations of chemicals from edible portions that we receive back from the lab with our fish consumption screening values, or FCSVs. FCSVs are chemical-specific screening values that are based on toxicity values like EPA reference doses, or RFDs, and ATSDR minimal risk levels, or MRLs. FCSVs are designed to be protective against the most sensitive toxicity endpoint for each chemical. So in other words, the health effect that is associated with the lowest level of exposure. We choose this approach to ensure that the levels we choose are also protective against health effects that are associated with higher levels of exposure as well. The calculation of these values also includes uncertainty factors in order to be health protective. More information on the FCSVs and how they're calculated is available online. It can be found in our Michigan Fish Consumption Advisory Program Guidance, Appendix A of that document, available on our Eat Safe Fish website. And it's linked here for when these slides get sent out. When comparing fish contaminant levels with FCSVs, our program uses the 95% upper confidence limit, or 95% UCL, of the arithmetic mean of the contaminant concentration. This is another health protective approach that we use that accounts for variability and uncertainty when using a relatively small fish sample size, roughly 5 to 20 fish, to estimate characteristics of the entire fish population in that river or lake. Another way to think of that 95% UCL is that it's a value that is expected to exceed the true population's mean 95% of the time. So it's a more health protective approach than just using the mean concentration for a sample. The Eat Safe Fish program has developed equations to calculate those FCSVs based on both cancer and non-cancer effects. These are based on standard US EPA risk assessment equations that I've included on this slide. As you can see, these equations include several factors, including the reference dose, relative source contribution, body weight, ingestion rate, and exposure frequency and duration. These are all factors that influence an individual's risk of developing a health effect from a chemical exposure. And while we do have that process to calculate cancer FCSVs, currently all of our FCSVs are based on non-cancer effects. So I've included this table here showing a summary of our current FCSVs that have been calculated. So you see that first column there up in the upper left for combined DDT and its metabolites, DDE and DDD, combined dioxins, furans, and coplanar PCBs. Then mercury and PCBs filling out that top line. And then the bottom line, we've got, our bottom half, we've got PFAS, selenium, total toxaphene, and then some specific toxaphene parlors. Not all of these chemicals have all of the different meal categories that we can assign. So you can see on the left there, we have on the less restrictive side, 16 meals per month. And then as you get more and more restrictive down there, lower amounts that are being recommended down to do not eat advisory. Not all of these chemicals have all those meal categories. You can see mercury and PFAS, once you get past the 6 meals per year, it jumps and it skips that limited category and goes right to the do not eat. Selenium also has a couple categories that it skips from two meals per month all the way to a do not eat, based on the acute effects that selenium exposure can have. So yeah, these again, these values are all compared with the concentrations of chemicals that we measure in fish tissue in order to issue our consumption guidelines. So I talked about a bit already, the different meal categories that we assign with the Eat Safe Fish program. But again, each tested contaminant from a sample is assigned a meal category based on the level of that contaminant in the fish sample, from 16 servings per month down to a do not eat advisory. And I'll talk about that limited guideline and the do not eat guideline a bit on the next slide. But I did want to talk about how we communicate our guidelines in my servings per month, or MI servings per month. My servings are fish serving sizes based on the weight of the individual eating the fish. This is because body weight is an important factor that affects an individual's risk from exposure to chemicals. For adults, one my serving is equivalent to about 8 ounces of fish. And for children, it's equivalent to about 2 to 4 ounces of fish, as their lower body weight results in higher susceptibility to chemical exposures. We have this my servings process because it makes our guidelines more clear and easy to remember, since people don't need to keep track of different guidelines for different populations. So, you know, the fish only has one recommendation. It's, you know, if it's 1 serving per month, 1 my serving per month, that's the same advice for adults as well as children. Next, I want to talk a little bit more about our limited and do not eat guidelines. So with limited guideline, that indicates that some populations should avoid all of those fish. Those populations include people who may have children in the next several years, are currently pregnant, or are breastfeeding, people with pre-existing health conditions like cancer or heart disease, and children under age 15. All others should still limit their consumption of fish, of limited fish, to 1 or 2 meals per year. And that category is right above a do not eat. And our do not eat guideline indicates that all populations should avoid those fish. Even just 1 meal of fish with the do not eat guideline can raise your risk of harmful health effects. So just to kind of talk a little bit more about what our guidelines mean and how to kind of interpret what that guideline means. Consuming more fish than what our listed Eat Safe Fish guideline does not mean that you are guaranteed to experience a harmful health effect. So for example, if a guideline is 8 servings per month for a specific fish, then consuming more than 8 servings per month of that fish may raise your risk of some harmful health effect. But it's not necessarily going to happen. The goal of our guidelines is to minimize risk, since everyone responds to chemicals differently. Last, I want to briefly go over our fish consumption recommendation sheets. And I have an example of one of those on this slide to the right there. These documents are prepared by the Eagle FCMP, and they contain data summaries specific to water bodies and fish species. So the one on the right there is for bluegill from Fidelity Lake in Ingham County. These summaries include information like how many fish have been sampled, when the samples were collected, the length of each fish, and the concentrations of each contaminant measured in the fish. So going back to that sheet, you can see that 6 bluegill were collected back in 2010. They were tested for mercury, PCBs, DDT, chloridane, and toxaphene. The recommendation sheets include the calculated meal categories based on the FCSVs. They also include a final meal category, which is the one that results in the lowest number of recommended servings. So in the example, the final meal category is 8 servings per year, which is based on mercury. 8 servings per year is lower than the meal categories for PCBs and DDT, which are both 16 servings per year. And chloridane and toxaphene were not detected. So adhering to the guideline of 8 servings per month based on mercury would also be protective for those other contaminants that were also detected in those fish. However, the FCSVs and those calculations are not the only consideration that goes into assigning a guideline. Additional considerations may modify the guideline, including, for example, known sources of contamination. If we know that there's a source nearby that's contributing to a water body and happen to see lower values in our tested results, we may consider that and make a guideline more restrictive, since we know that contamination is ongoing, as well as the data set age and completeness. Each of these factors are considered before eventually deciding on a final guideline. The last step in our Eat Safe Fish guideline process is finally issuing the guidelines. This includes our efforts to prepare the Eat Safe Fish guides, our statewide Safe Fish guidelines, and our outreach efforts to raise awareness about the risks and benefits of eating fish in Michigan. So the Eat Safe Fish Guide is kind of our main product that we like to release and share with people. It contains all fish consumption guidelines issued by our program, and it is composed of 5 regional guides based on the different regions of Michigan. So 4 quadrants of the Lower Peninsula, Southwest, Southeast, Northwest, and Northeast, as well as 1 for the Upper Peninsula. It is regularly updated with new and updated fish consumption guidelines based on new data that we've received since the previous update. In addition to just pointing out the different guidelines that we have, the guide also contains helpful information for anglers, like how our guidelines are developed, what they're based on, kind of the stuff I'm talking about today, how to identify common fish in Michigan with illustrations, as well as how to properly clean and cook a fish to remove the most contaminants. This guide is organized by county, water body, and species, each in alphabetical order. Each county has a map showing which water bodies in that county have guidelines. And then each water body has a table listing the species that has a guideline, as well as the chemical driving or causing that guideline, the chemical causing that final meal category I just talked about, as well as the size of the fish, if it's applicable, and the consumption guideline in my servings per month. So looking at the example I've included on this slide, we're looking at the Eat Safe Fish Guide page for Ingham County. The screenshot is showing Fidelity Lake, which is the recommendation sheet we just looked at. So you can see that guideline there for bluegill, and it's 8 servings per month. It applies to all bluegill regardless of the size, and it's based on levels of mercury. And then I wanted to take a second too to talk about some special guidelines that you might see in our guides. First and foremost, that's the 2X guideline. These guidelines are based on chemicals like PCBs and dioxins that can build up in the fat and skin of fish. These guidelines can be doubled if the 3 C's are followed, which are choose, clean, and cook. So choosing fish, lowering chemicals, cleaning the fish by removing the skin and cutting off the fat where those chemicals store up, and then cooking the fillet on a grate so that more fat that's hidden in the fillet can drip away while it's cooking. These techniques can remove up to half of the chemicals from your meal, but unfortunately those can't be applied to mercury and PFAS, or excuse me, to guidelines based on mercury and PFAS because they primarily build up in the fillet. So these techniques do not remove as much of these chemicals, and the 2X rule cannot be applied there. Another special guideline you might see are what we call length breaks, which indicate where chemicals are correlated in that fish with the length of the fish. So if a trend is present showing that though there are more chemicals in fish that are larger, then we may issue different guidelines for those fish based on the size of the fish. So I've got a table here for Galloway Lake in Oakland County. You can see for carp, that guideline is based on PCBs, which is one of our 2X chemicals. So you'll see that my servings per month is 2 servings per month, and it's got that superscript 2X to show that if you clean and cook the carp to remove the fat and skin as much as possible, it's safe to double that to 4 servings per month. And then below that, you see for largemouth and smallmouth bass, those guidelines have that length break at 18 inches. So for largemouth bass under 18 inches, the recommendation is 2 servings per month. And then for bass over 18 inches, the guideline is 1 serving per month. And another item to note, since those bass recommendations are based on mercury levels, you see those guidelines do not have that 2X applied because the mercury does not build up in the fat and skin and can't be removed easily. So in addition to the water body specific guidelines, which is what I just discussed, the Eat Safe Fish program also issues statewide fish consumption guidelines known as the statewide Safe Fish Guidelines. These guidelines are species specific and they apply to fish that do not have any water body specific guidelines. So if you're fishing from a lake where fish haven't been tested before, or where the results are pending, been tested, but the results aren't back yet, we recommend following those statewide Safe Fish Guidelines. These guidelines are based on average statewide levels of contaminants in fish over several decades of testing. Most of these guidelines are based on mercury levels, but the exceptions there are for carp and catfish, which are both based on PCBs. So I've got our statewide safe fish guidelines table copied here. As you can see, we've issued statewide guidelines for many different fish species. There's 16 in total there. Again, mostly based on mercury, but a couple based on PCBs. But between the water body specific guidelines that we issue, as well as these statewide safe fish guidelines, there's a lot of advice and guidance available for people who are trying to find and eat safer fish. And then I want to finish up by talking about the different kinds of outreach that we do to raise awareness and knowledge about the Eat Safe Fish program and safe fish consumption. In addition to the Eat Safe Fish guide, we also distribute an Eat Safe Fish brochure, which explains the basics of contaminants in fish and how those contaminants can impact health. And then we also create other printed materials like our Buy Safe Fish guide. We'll also design and distribute signage for water bodies that have do not eat advisories. And we'll issue press releases and participate in interviews with state and local news whenever we have new or updated information to share regarding the Eat Safe Fish program to try to reach as many people as possible. And lastly, members from the Eat Safe Fish team or our division's community outreach unit will also attend fishing related events around the state to talk to attendees about Eat Safe Fish and our information and our recommendations. So including kids fishing tournaments, fish fries and fish boils and other fishing related, but also maybe just, water body related, lake related festivals and other events. We'll also conduct outreach through our extremely successful River Walker programs. So River Walkers are seasonal employees hired by MDHHS partners who work to spread Eat Safe Fish information and messaging through in-person conversations with anglers where they fish. River Walker programs have been established in 4 areas so far: the Saginaw Bay area, the Detroit River, the Huron River watershed, and the Kalamazoo River watershed. Combined, our River Walkers speak with thousands of shoreline anglers each year. Over the years, we've found that these in-person conversations are very effective ways to convey information to anglers, as well as to build trust with the community and with our program and our recommendations. So we are very proud of the important work that our River Walker programs have done and continue to do. Okay, last I want to talk about future outreach plans to expand our program's capacity to reach anglers and people who eat locally caught fish in Michigan. So first is the Eat Safe Fish Ambassador Pilot Project, which is funded by the EPA through our Detroit Urban Anglers Grant. This project will support hiring an Eat Safe Fish ambassador to build partnerships with local businesses, as well as organizations and gathering spaces in Detroit, with the goal of creating sustainable sources of information about safe fish consumption. We've also submitted an application to the EPA for a new grant that would fund an Eat Safe Fish community outreach educator. This individual would further support Eat Safe Fish related outreach statewide, primarily in environmental justice communities, by attending fishing related events in those communities, as well as conducting non-traditional outreach at locations like grocery stores, barbershops, and sporting goods stores. We haven't heard back yet from the EPA on if they're going to fund that, but we are really excited about that, and we're hoping that they do. Okay, so just looking ahead to next month's meeting, I will be back here again to talk about particularly how our program is treating PFAS consumption guidelines in fish. So if there's any topics that any of you want to hear more about, any more specifics that you'd like to get about our program, please do reach out to me or to Kelly. If there are anyone else from MPART, if you would like to hear more about anything in particular, I'd be happy to include slides to talk about those when I'm back next month. So thank you so much for listening. For more information on our program, you can visit our website, michigan.gov/eatsafefish. I've got my information below, and of course, I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has them.
Thank you, Brandon.
Mhm.
I see hands up already. Mary Blanchard, start us off.
Thank you. Hi, Brandon. I'm
Hello.
from Holly, Michigan, and recently one of our township council people had contacted you regarding the fish on Rice Lake and Bush Lake. I don't know if you remember that conversation. Back in March 2022, I had contacted Brandon Armstrong regarding the fish that had been tested, and we had he was kind enough to share the information on the testing. Also, Lisa Fisher had sent an email stating that the fish were going to be listed as a mercury guideline. They also qualified for PFAS, but that was not set because there were 2 tests that they were still waiting on. I contacted back in July of that year, and she said they were still waiting. I went on right before this program and looked at the Eat Safe Fish, and Rice and Bush Lake still are not listed under Oakland County. So I don't know if that's still an ongoing investigation, or if it's going to be covered next month in your PFAS discussion. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So those guidelines, we do have all the data back on those. We have gone through and finalized those guidelines. They will be included in our next update to the guides. And I'm also happy to discuss those in depth. If you have any questions, I'll include some slides next month if you'd be interested in hearing more about those specific guidelines. And hear more about those next month. But those will be included in our 2023 update, which we're hoping to have out this spring.
I guess my concern is, though, that that's almost a year since they had a good idea that there was going to be some kind of guidance. As we've discussed with the COG, a public notification is an important concept. It seems like a reach out to the people who live on those lakes just as a precautionary type thing, might be a good thing to look into, not just for these 2 lakes, but for other lakes that might be tested and, have fish that are at risk. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate that suggestion and your question. Thank you.
All right, Tony, and then Rick.
Thanks, Sandy. So I appreciate the presentation, and I'm not sure, Brandon, that this question is for you, but perhaps for others on the call. For those of us in Oscoda in particular, we know that the current PFOS guidance is obsolete, having been created over a decade ago. And we have been told by the department 3-4 years ago that revised guidelines were in the works. It's now 3 or 4 years later, still no new guidelines. And we know that the guidelines were obsolete before the EPA's new science numbers came out last year. And so the questions I'm getting are, why is this taking so long? Quite honestly, there's just not a lot of confidence in this information as it pertains to PFAS. Certainly in my communities and in other places that are aware of the problem. And so I guess it's a bit of a head scratcher when we're talking about Eat Safe Fish and it's not based on the best available science. Why is it taking so long? When are we going to get a better, a true, accurate and better read on this? What can be done in the meantime to let people know that guidance when it comes to PFAS is not where it needs to be.
Sure, Tony, thanks for the question. And I will say that is a topic that I'm planning on talking about in depth next month, where we're at with our review of the data, which I will confirm that we are looking into all of those studies that you mentioned. We are currently reviewing the data that's out there on PFOS in light of the new scientific literature that's come to light recently. That includes the EPA's interim lifetime health advisory that you mentioned. And then the conclusions of that review will then inform whether, our, and I guess by guidelines, I presume you're referring to our screening values and how we set those guidelines.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, just to make sure. But that will inform whether, those need to be updated, and if so, what those new values should be. I don't have a specific timeline to give you right now, but we are working rapidly to get these out sooner rather than later. And again, I am planning to talk more about that next month, where we're focusing more on PFAS in particular in fish.
Yeah, and if Tony, if that's something you want Brandon to kind of dive into for the slides for next month, I asked him to kind of provide an overview for this conversation to get us started so that next month we could dive into some of the more specifics. The Eat Safe Fish Guide release is still supposed to be this month, Brandon, right? The updated 2023, we still think this month?
We're looking at this spring, trying to get them out there in final review. They're very close, but certainly sometime this spring.
Okay. So anyways, but if you want to dive that far into the weeds on this, Tony, we can certainly put a slide in on for next month to make sure we cover that, to cover all the like you said, those numbers have changed over time. And I know we were waiting specifically to look at the toxicity data that EPA used for their newest MCL proposals, because the basis of that is a PFAS toxicity number, that we wanted to understand the science behind it and which studies they were actually basing those endpoint parameters on. So we can certainly put some stuff in here for next month.
Okay, Tony, did that help?
I look forward to getting the information.
All right.
I still don't understand why we haven't done something even before the EPA numbers came out, but I look forward to getting the information.
All right. Rick, and then Dan Brown. And Mary, your hand is still up. I'm assuming you're just exercising.
Yeah, I had a question for Brandon. What is your reference dose that you're using or for PFOS? Do you know that offhand, or is that something you're going to get into next week or next month?
Yeah, you're right, Rick. That's something that I was planning on talking about next month. All of those, all of the things that go into that, those screening values for PFOS, I was planning to talk about next month.
Okay, because I know the EPA is using 2 times 10 to the minus fifth or something for the reference dose. I don't know if that's what you're using, but the new reference dose is like 7.9 times 10 to the minus ninth. I mean, it's really low. So I'd be curious to look at to hear about the numbers that you're using in your calculations next month. So
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Thank you. Happy to talk about those next month.
Okay, Dan Brown.
Yeah, hey Brandon, this is Dan from HRWC. So yeah, I wanted to give Brandon and his team a shout out for the Riverwalkers project in particular. He mentioned that they're helping us out in the Huron River watershed, and I really like the way this program operates and is framed, and it's just a really straightforward, elegant way to communicate risks to the people as they're fishing, right in the moment, right in the spot where they need that information. So it's been really neat to see it in action, and it's been really neat hearing from the other river walkers on other rivers and things like that. I would love to see it replicated more broadly across the state. I know funding is of course an issue and that, but it's just such an elegant solution to to a problem, that I would love to see that program replicated in some way. So happy to support that as the opportunities arise. Echoing what Tony and Rick have said. The Eat Safe Fish guides are really the core guide, and we get questions every couple weeks from anglers asking about various lakes or parts of the Huron River, and we always refer to them. So it's really a core handy resource for us to relate people back. So this is really central, I think, to what we do in keeping people safe. But to Rick and Tony's point, we are getting a pretty steady stream of questions now about how the new EPA values and the new toxicity information is going to influence the guidelines going forward. And just as a reminder to folks on the call, so the do not eat advisory was actually relaxed slightly on our river on the lowest extent, going down to Lake Erie. So below 275, we don't have a do not eat fish advisory anymore. We have a more limited, less stringent guideline. But then the EPA data and all these other studies have come out since then, so it's caused some confusion with folks, particularly in that stretch of river, about what they should be doing, because there's sort of these conflicting narratives around the overall health and toxicity of consuming PFAS in fish. So we do need those updated guidelines. But I would say that's maybe the most pressing bit of information that we need, is just how do we communicate that, and what would you tell your friends and family if they're asking you if they can eat the fish out of a place where we know that they're contaminated. So echoing Rick and Tony, and love the program, and looking forward to having our orientation next week.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that, Dan. And it's a pleasure to work with you and with HRWC as well, to get walkers along the Huron. And I guess to everyone on the call, if there's a river near you that you think a river walker program would be helpful. We always need great partners to kind of work with and partner with to get those started. But if the funding's there, this is it's a successful program. So we're always looking for ways to expand that out. So please do reach out. And yeah, just to reiterate, with Rick and Tony's comments too, we're getting those questions too about what we're doing with the guidelines, and that's certainly accelerated our review of that data. So hoping to have some conclusions on that sooner rather than later, and help you guys out.
Tony, your hand's up, but I think it's just left up. Is that correct?
That's correct. I tried to put it down and I'm having problems, so my
Okay.
apologies.
That's all right. So I am not a fish person. I like to eat fish. I just don't like to catch them. So I have a silly question here. How often do these eat safe fish guidelines get produced? How often do you bring those out?
Yeah, so we generally try to release them on an annual basis. It really depends on what kind of data we get, and what data has been collected. Our guides, usually we try to get them updated in the spring of each year, in advance of the fishing season. But in a lot of the water bodies where there's historical contamination, once you get one reading of those fish, it's unlikely that for the mercury and the PCBs that it's going to change a lot from one year to the next year. But with PFAS and learning how that interacts in fish, we've been trying to release more regular updates as we get more data on PFOS for the first time in a lot of these water bodies. As we get data that's more urgent, you know, and to speak to that, we had a press release back in January for smelt and then for some carp based on PCBs. But as we get data that points to more either guidelines that are a significant shift or ones that are particularly restrictive, do not eat, we'll push to get those out a little bit earlier. It may not be reflected in the guide. And we may not be able to update the guide yet, but at least issuing a press release, putting some information on our website to point to those so that those aren't, you know, waiting until the next time we can get those guides updated, because those do take a while to get updated and then get printed and get distributed.
And I just wanted to make sure I understood too. So if it says, you know, there's a guidance because of mercury, it doesn't mean there's not problems with other chemicals in there. It just means mercury's like the winner. They're like the top dog of bad things in that fish.
Yeah, I don't know if I call it a
Yeah.
winner. I guess
Okay.
maybe the loser. You
The
know,
loser, right?
But
The
you
highest
know,
number.
not it's not.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. It's the one of most concern. It's the
Got it.
one driving the most or the lowest number of meals that would be able to be consumed without that extra risk.
Okay. And Dave, when you had your hand up.
Thanks, Tammy. Brandon, I appreciate your presentation, but I have one question. As Tony stated earlier, in the Oscoda area, these Eat Safe Fish guides are pretty important because Saba River, Van Etten Lake, Clark's Marsh, all the local areas obviously have a big issue with PFAS in fish. My question is, if this is, you're going to be getting this new EPA regulation, and you guys are reviewing that, but we have been told in Oscoda that there is going to be no fish testing done in 2023, that there's nothing planned. So my question is how often does this Eat Safe Fish guide need to be updated? Because as we know, it may be 2025 before the next Eat Safe Fish guide gets updated. So if there's no testing done in 2023 and maybe some done in 2024, and it takes 6 months to get that, we won't see an updated guide until 2025, which to me is a concern.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I can't speak to the testing plans myself. Those are finalized by our counterparts over to Eagle, the FCMP, which we do talk with about those guidelines, or excuse me, about those testing plans. I can't speak specifically into what went into that decision, but I will say that again, with concentrations that have been, when we have a couple years or more of data, it usually takes more than a year or so for those start to decline or change appreciably. So there is that level of protection into what we release, you know, a certain year, and then maybe we don't have data for that the next year, but we collect data the year after that. So there is that level of protection. Again, like I kind of talked about a bit with the in the data section, we do include a lot of health protective measures in our guidelines to make sure that, you know, even what we come out with initially is going to be on the more protective side, using that 95% confidence interval, including uncertainty factors. So we do try to incorporate that uncertainty and to be health protective in that way when we do issue the guidelines, because we know, you know, Eagle's limited in how quickly they can get out to the lakes, and what funding they can have. So we have a lot of water bodies in Michigan, and I know they have done a really good job trying to get to as many as they can each year. But I guess that's all I'll speak to there, and I'm sure Eagle could talk more about that. FCMP could talk more about that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank
If
you.
I can jump in real quick.
Yep, go ahead,
Sandy.
Abby.
Thanks. Dave, I will double check on that about not being able to sample any of the fish in your area for this year. I don't know that, but I'll double check with our fish contaminant monitoring program in Eagle and see if that is true or if what they've got on their thing. It might be that they've gotten a lot of fish in that area over the last couple of years, and they think they've got a good representative number of fish for data. But let me double check on that piece. To that extent, it's important to note that over the last 4 or 5 years, the PFAS data, PFOS data that's been collected for fish has doubled and quadrupled. They've gone from sampling like 60 or 7 different water bodies for fish for PFOS to 100, and now they're sampling like about 1,000 fish a year for PFOS. So it's a massive amount of data, which is another reason it does take a while for DHS to chug through all these numbers and all of the data and make sure they've got it all right for all the water bodies and do that level of QA/QC before they actually put the guides out. But to Brandon's point, we wouldn't expect dramatic changes in the water bodies or in the fish contaminant levels unless there was a significant change to that water body. Like you had a source that got shut off somehow, or you had some significant cleanup. So if we don't get back to Oscoda for a year to do fish contaminant monitoring, we wouldn't expect there to be a huge change in the concentrations in the fish. Now, if we end up changing the toxicity reference dose for PFOS, then that will affect the whole state, and we'll have that conversation next month.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear that answer, Abby. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm not saying we got all the answers, Dave, but we'll
I understand.
We'll give a swing at it.
We were told by Eagle that back in February that there was no plan to do any testing in 2023.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Just curious.
Yeah. I will double check with them to see if that's truly the case. So
Thank you.
I know they put their plans out a year or two in advance, so we can confirm that.
Thanks,
you. Dave.
All right, I got Tony and then Dan.
Thanks.
And then Sandy, this is Connie. Could I ask a question after the other two?
Yes, I didn't see your hand up. Was your hand up before Tony's?
No, I'm on the phone.
Oh, that's why I couldn't tell. Okay, jump in, Connie, and then I'll let Tony and Dan go.
Oh, okay. Just, I'm in Oscoda right now in Oscoda County, and I had asked Eagle, in fact, I had emailed them, when are you going to test for PFAS here in Mac Lake? We know that the Mac Lake fire was the largest fire in the entire state of Michigan's history. I'm talking about before we did all the fire. I'm talking more recently, like in the 80s. And no one has ever tested Mac Lake, and I've begged for it, to test Mac Lake for PFOS. You're not going to have mercury. So you're not going to have PCBs. You're going to have PFOS in that lake. And it's heavily fished. So Brandon, I don't think your statewide levels are going to be worth anything when you look at Mac Lake. And then my second question to you is, when are you going to test Mac Lake for PFOS in the fish? And then secondly, what is the percentage of water bodies that you have tested in the state of Michigan for PFOS? That's it. Thank you.
We're going to get back to you on those, Connie. Hopefully Brandon or somebody was typing down those questions that you just had.
Okay, good.
Or actually, if you want to follow up with an email and just give us the list of questions, Connie, we'll make sure we do. Thank you, Sandy, because that was really quick, Connie. So, but we will definitely try to look into that, because I haven't heard of Mac Lake, and if you've got any information on the fire you're referring, that would be helpful too.
Oh yeah, it's famous. I think it was 1981, and it's a famous fire. It's the Huron National Forest, and it's the largest fire ever that we had in more recent times.
Okay. I must have missed it.
I was at a Queen concert or something that year and missed it. All right.
I won't say where I was, but it
All
wasn't
right.
watching the
Sorry.
news.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Connie, though. That's good. I think that question about the percentage of water bodies will be interesting to see if somebody can come up with that. Okay, now back to Tony and then Dan.
Okay, two quick questions. And Brandon, I'm not sure if you know the answers to these. Maybe somebody here does, but I've been told that the 300 part per billion do not eat, guidance for PFOS in fish is also the guidance for do not eat in deer is also 300 parts per billion. And I wanted to just find out, one, if that's true, and then secondly, even whether it is or it isn't, are the do not eat guidelines for PFOS in venison also being undergoing a review and revision in light of the new science?
Yeah, great questions, Tony. So first of all, I can confirm that that is accurate. We use the same fish consumption screen. I guess not fish. We use the same screening values that we use for our FCSVs, our fish consumption screening values, as we did for the venison analysis. So that is the same 300 part per billion do not eat, as well as the other cutoffs for the different meal categories there. And then to your second question, that is correct. So what we're reviewing, a big part of what we're reviewing right now is our reference dose. So the level of kind of the, I guess, the toxicity value that we're using for PFOS. If we decide that that is not protective enough and we want to change that down to something lower, the deer values will go down along with them. So it would apply to both the fish values and the deer values.
Thanks.
Great, thanks. All right, Dan.
Yeah, Abby, your comment a few comments ago was a really good segue to what I was thinking about at the moment, which is it would be helpful, I think, to have essentially a flow chart, a diagram, maybe a table or a map, and you may have been planning to pull these together already, but basically a summary of kind of like where the fish sampling project stands today in terms of the capacity, geography, representation of just where everything's coming from. And the reason I bring it up is because there is clearly, I think, interest amongst science-based nonprofits and universities to do sort of longer-term studies of periodic sampling to get at those questions that you were raising. So that the Huron River actually is the case where we had this major source that was shut off, and it would be really interesting to see how fast the PFAS levels come down in the fish over the next 15 years, say. So we had one of my colleagues actually had the idea, should we be sampling fish in specific areas along the Huron River every couple of years, and just trying to catch the same species of fish and following all the guidelines and so forth to do that, but doing it same spot, same location, same species, and just do it over the next 15 years. I like that idea. I think there's a market for those kind of studies, and I think figuring out how those studies could best complement or supplement, what the state is doing, I think is really useful, because it is evolving fast on every front. So I think just having that reference material for science-based organizations and researchers would be super useful.
Yeah, exactly. And we will endeavor to try to see if we can get that information, because I think it's really good questions. And I know they try really hard to get projects in the UP every year, projects across the state, good geographic distribution, but I don't know if there's particular areas that have been less served with fish sampling or with surface water sampling. I know we've got all of our most of our major rivers and stuff covered, but trying to compare that, do a comparative analysis to locations of hotspots or sources in those river waters would be very, very interesting. I know in talking with some of the other states that there has been some discussion on the smelt results. You know, Michigan and Wisconsin got higher smelt results along Lake Superior, and Minnesota up on the North Shore of Lake Superior got nothing. So they don't have a smelt advisory. And so, you know, trying to compare our data, what does that mean for smelt across the whole water body? Are we really focusing on, you know, smaller sections of water bodies that could have different eating consumption guidelines because of the PFAS concentration? So there's a lot to still learn. I mean, we are still figuring out what makes the difference, why smelt have high concentrations, but then other species of fish have you know, those high concentrations, but not all of them. So I think there's a lot of, and with the 4-day EPA fish, what did they call it, Brandon? It was a fish,
Fish forum.
Fish forum. Thank you.
Yep.
4 days of fish forum, all about fish, and the you know, you could see everybody geeking out on the science behind the fish. So the research is going wild. We won't have to do it all ourselves, but it is nice to be able to have such a good body of evidence and information on our own front here. So, all right, I'll shut up and let Sandy finish it up.
I think Dave and Tony, I think your hands are still up just by mistake, I'm going to assume. So thank you, Brandon, for sitting in the hot seat here of the COG meeting. I really do. We really do appreciate all you do. I think this is just a body of people that want to make sure everybody in our state is protected as much as we can. And so we feel this obligation to sort of be the voice, but thank you. And I think we all, the science is crazy moving fast. So stay tuned next month and we'll see what's going on. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for all your questions, and talk to you next month.
Yeah.
And I see, Sandy, one more thing. In the chat, Mike Jerry put the 5-year rotating watershed system in, so we can add that in as a piece to talk about next month as well.
Okay.
So
thank you, Mike. All right, Abby, you got some MPART updates?
oh, yes, I do. And Kelly, my amazing Vanna White assistant.
Oh, my
Thank you, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, couple of things just to keep you guys up to date. We've been just through on our updated minimum analyte list. So Kelly, any chance you've got that open for the group, or could grab the MPART website? So the analyte list has got drinking water methods, groundwater, surface water methods, and a more of a all around catch-all type of method for soils and wastewaters and sludges. So we have included our Eagle lab, and a couple of the other labs are including a new drinking water method that I just want to highlight for you. The historical one has been the US EPA method 537.1 or 0.2, because there's a revision 2 to it. But we're now starting to use US EPA method 533. It's also a certified drinking water method. It will do more compounds. The old method does 18 compounds, and I think this one is doing like 20 some. Mike Jerry can probably put that in the chat for us because he knows off the top of his head. So we will be doing additional drinking water sampling using 533. It gets the 6.2 FTS that we want to be able to see, because that's one of the main components in the newer firefighting foams. So we want to be able to see that. So I just wanted to highlight that for you. If you hear people that are getting drinking water sampling done, please ask them to use either 537.1 or 533. It's on our MPART website under this minimum analyte list. So it's been updated for your use. So tell your friends. Certified labs, again, we have a really big push Well, we're going to be having a year-long push of things, of people to be able to do testing of their own wells in the coming year. So we've updated the certified PFAS lab list. These are labs that are certified to actually do the drinking water methods appropriately. And so we've in-state, out-of-state labs, and there's a whole bunch of obviously with the new MCLs coming out, proposed MCLs coming out with EPA, you know, we're very happy to have done all of our sampling ahead of time, most of our sampling ahead of time, because now the rest of the country is really scrambling to figure out lab capacity. So I do understand that a lot of these labs are quite busy, but just know that that list has been all updated by our student, and so those numbers and amounts are all correct. So John, you got a question?
Yes, I do. Is Eagle going to recommend 533 also for landfill sampling for PFAS as well? Or because currently I know that the landfill near me is using 537, and
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's a 0.1 or a 0.2 at this point.
There's oftentimes they will use a 537 modified, which is an isotope dilution, which will get you more parameters. But if it's a drinking water sampling, we would ask them to do either 537.1 as certified or 533. For groundwater samples for monitoring while around a landfill, we would ask them to use probably 8327, which is a groundwater surface water EPA method, or they could use the draft EPA method 1633. So Mike, Jerry, did you want to add anything else to that?
Yeah, thank you. So for groundwater, as we said, method 8327 is what we in Eagle use. Method 1633, they should not be using a drinking water method to do groundwater. Where the confusion falls in, there are a lot of labs that do a method, as Abby said, and they call it method 537 modified. And basically what that is saying is we're doing using the same kind of instruments that we do for drinking water, meaning a liquid chromatography with dual mass spec, using the technique of isotope dilution. And just to make it easy, we just all call it modified 537, but it is not a drinking water method. It is the lab's own method they've come up with to do groundwater sampling. So you shouldn't be using a drinking water method to do groundwater monitor well sampling.
Okay, that's really good to know. Yeah, I want to follow up with our Eagle folks that are doing the sampling here at the sanitary landfill here. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
is this
likely
published?
if it's Eagle
No,
staff
go ahead.
if it's Eagle staff doing the work, and if they're sending it off to our Eagle lab, then those monitor wells are being done using method 8327.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't see that in the QMRs right now. I just see the 537. And they're using a consulting service to actually do the testing to comply with the Eagle requirements for water.
Well, in that case, they may be doing what they're calling the 537 modified. And if they're doing that, that's okay. That's a good method to do it. It's just a name. And otherwise, you have to do, like I said, liquid chromatography using tandem mass spec, utilizing the technique of isotope dilution. So nobody really wants to hear that. So they just say, yeah, it's 537.
You're just showing off now, Mike.
Yeah.
No, that's good. Mike, I appreciate that. That's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
He is. And John, feel free to reach out to Kent Walters, because I think he's got pitch landfill over there.
Yeah, I've talked to him a number of times, him and Ted as well. So Tim
beautiful.
as well.
Yeah, beautiful.
Thank you.
All right. So a little detour into landfill world. Coming back. No, it's all good. It's all a learning experience for us. Coming back, this is exciting. Some of the results for the MyPES, the Michigan PFAS Exposure Health Study, are going to be presented to the participants. As far as I know, that's not open to the public. I think that one, and someone can confirm that one, Sandy, because I think I'm pretty sure you're invited to that. Those will be open houses to discuss the results, which will be posted online, but this particular open house will be in Belmont on April 20th and in Parchment Cooper Township for 4/19. So very excited about that. That is like the phase one. Then a lot of those same participants got invited to do the national study, the MSS, the multi-site study, I think it is, at the national level, where Michigan got to be one of 7 or 8 states that participated in doing a national PFAS study for exposure. And so this is really important work. And so I thank all of those participants who did spend the time to go through this and do this. This was a monumental feat. And I think, Sandy, what, 1,000 participants in this between the 2 locations?
Yep, I think we have 1,000, maybe a titch more than that for this first round of studies. So hopefully we'll get some data that'll steer us in a direction here.
Yeah. So that's pretty exciting. One of the other things that we'll just bring up for today as an FYI for you, you might be seeing some of this, the Heritage Crystal Clean facility in Wyoming, Michigan, has is going to be leasing and is installing what they call the PFAS annihilator through Battelle. It's what we call, it's a SCWO, so it's a supercritical water oxidation unit. So that is a fancy name for basically taking waste material and getting it up to a critical temperature and pressure to basically destroy the bonds of PFAS. So this will be one of the first units installed in the country. We're working very closely with them to keep an eye on things. We're going to be doing sampling, testing, verification. Battelle will be there with their personnel to actually run it. And we're going to continue to monitor that as they get up and running in Wyoming. So that is a location that they already do all kinds of waste disposal products. There's landfill leachate that goes there. There's all kinds of things that they take on a regular basis as part of their normal treatment systems. But this is obviously a new and treatment technology, destruction treatment technology that has been done on a pilot scale in a few places around the country, but this will be the first location for, as I understand it, this will be the first location for Battelle to actually, get their PFAS annihilator in full scale mode and here in Michigan. So we're going to be working with them closely on that. So I just wanted to give you guys all a heads up of that. The next piece is we did hit the 60,000 gallon mark for our AFFF collection from fire stations and airports around the state. So that you might have seen that go out as a little press release. We're quite happy about that, getting all of that out before it becomes more contamination for our environment. Also working with Independence Township down in the Clarkston area. They had some public supply wells that had some PFAS hits. Back when we did the statewide sampling, they had taken those particular wells offline so that they, didn't have to use those contaminated wells. So they continued to supply their public municipal water system with other wells. But in the meantime, they have gotten a grant to actually look at trying to determine the source of that contamination for those public supply wells that were impacted. And so they're going to be doing some proactive precautionary sampling, much like what we've been trying to do around the state as we find locations. And so we're working with them to, they're going to start doing some precautionary res well sampling in their township. So again, you might hear about that one. That'll be coming through here as an area of interest here shortly. We'll put that on our website. It's just not up quite yet. And then we did get final thing I'll throw out there, we did get a response letter from FAA. We asked, this was a letter, and Kelly, I don't know if you've got that letter up. I didn't, I failed to bring it up in time. Maybe Amy's got it. This was a letter, it's on our MPART website. We sent a letter from the state of Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Alaska, Nebraska, and Illinois, and ask them to help contribute and look for funding sources and other preventative measures for airports around our country, because FAA has been a little quiet on what they are hoping to do. And so we sent that letter last November and just got a response. Thanks, Amy. Just got a response here. If you can scroll up a little bit so you can show everybody where that's, yeah, there you go. So letter basically gave us a listing of what they have done. We were hoping to really meet with them and talk a little bit more, but they have, obviously are working with the new mil-spec firefighting foam that's coming out, and then obviously working with EPA. And then I think there was one more piece. Oh, they cited the Preventing PFAS Runoff at Airports Act, which the president signed in, and then also cited the money that they gave to the Gerald R. Ford International Airport as part of their pilot project for implementing cost-effective remediation methods for PFAS in soil. So, and I think MSU got part of that, is doing part of that study for the Ford Airport. So anyways, I wanted to call these things to your attention. There's a lot of stuff going on. We have not decided exactly how we're going to respond to this, but thought we would at least bring it to your attention. So yes, Mike, what did I forget?
You might want to point out that Michigan provided all our airports with test carts so they would not have to test and spray PFAS or contaminated water around their airports. So we were, good Lord, 2 to 3 years ahead of the federal government on that. So all our airports in Michigan already have these test carts to do that, so they do not have to spray PFAS or firefighting foam in doing their testing. So way ahead of everybody. Our legislature provided money for our airports to do that.
See, we did have stuff that we could have been proud of, and we forgot to say that at the beginning of the meeting. That's good to know. Can I bring up one thing too, before you go on to new sites?
Yep.
An update like that is the EPA is having a public comment period. I think it is Thursday, May 4th, on the new MCLs. Is that it, Tony, on the new MCLs, or is it?
That's right.
On
That's
the new
right.
MCLs.
Yep.
They are looking for people to send in public comment by email, by letter, by horseback, however you can get your public comments in about the need for strong levels for this. So if people need those sites, I think if you go to EPA PFAS, you could probably find it, but if not, let me know and I can send you the link. They've got a public meeting posted that you can sign up to speak at that goes from like 12 noon to 8 p.m. So on Thursday, May 4th. So I would encourage people to make a public comment if you can.
And Sandy, I would just add that for written public comments, there's a longer period of time. It doesn't have to be submitted that day. It's 60 days from the middle of March or so. I don't have the exact dates, but you can submit a separate written comment if you want.
I think it'll be like the middle of May of the 60 days will be up. And then there's also a community engagement session with EPA on their PFAS roadmap. I've got that down as April.
Next Wednesday, I think.
Yes, April 19th at night. So I'm signed up to do that one. They've got so many listening sessions, it's hard to keep track. But EPA's got a lot of them. So yeah, definitely if you've got public comments or you want to support the MCLs or provide any kind of comments to them, please do that. I know they are going to probably be swamped. But it's good for them to hear the good things, as well as the rest of the country is going to be panicking about some of these MCLs. But it's good for them to hear the perspective from Michigan, where we already have some pretty low numbers, some of the lowest in the country. And, the sky didn't fall. Things are still happening all right with the lower numbers. So, all right. Anything else, Sandy? Okay. Couple more things. I actually saw this on the news last night in Kent County. So Wood TVA was covering this new site, River Ridge Sewage Lagoon in Grant. That was our new site for today, out in Grant in Owego County. So, and that one is live, I believe, right? Okay. Oh, yes. And I asked my good friend Sarah to come and just give a quick update on this, because this was something we talked about, oh gosh, 6 months or more. You guys might remember that there was $5 million given by the legislature for residential well sampling. This was something that was given as a grant, and I think, Sarah, when did they actually give you the money? Last summer?
Last summer, yeah, it came through, but it was rather nebulous as far as we weren't sure where it was coming from and to who it was going to. So I think it took us until this September where it was, oh, we're it, we're it.
Yes. So Sarah, would you introduce yourself real quickly so that anybody on the COG who has not seen you before might be introduced?
Yeah, sure. Good evening, and glad to be here. I'm Sarah Pearson. I am the Source Water Unit Supervisor in Drinking Water and Environmental Health Division. And I've been over here in drinking water for almost 2 years. And prior to that, I spent the majority of my career in remediation and working with Abby out of Grand Rapids. And so I'm pleased to be here, and I've learned quite a bit this evening as well, and it's been a privilege. So.
All right. So I know I asked Sarah to give us a quick overview on this, because I didn't want to take her words and try to regurgitate it to you. So I said, Sarah, come give your quick update for everybody.
Right. Just a quick update that the legislature last summer, they put in their appropriations bill, $5 million in grants to our local health departments to enable private well testing. Back more than a decade ago, my understanding is that private well testing was free for residents, and our laboratory indicated that it would be beneficial to bring this type of service back to our residents in Michigan. And the spirit of the appropriation was to bring private testing to include coliforms, nitrates, nitrites, arsenic, and other contaminants. And so PFAS could potentially be another contaminant, but in the spirit of this, we wanted to get this off the ground quickly, and worked through the winter with local health department partners, DHHS, other Eagle divisions, and we worked out a phased approach to do this, because we feel that this is very important, and we want to provide good, solid metrics going forward to show how valuable this is to our residents. And we wanted to focus on those standard parameters that, especially if you've heard about, the statewide need for a statewide sanitary code and the effects of failing septics across the state. We felt that focusing on things like coliforms and nitrates and nitrites might be a better way to get into this and get this up and going and get it launched and introduce this to people. And then down the road, as we have metrics, we're going to stand up a web page where there's going to be an online portal where residents can go in and they can request the testing. They'll receive a test kit at home. They'll be able to do the test, take their water sample, package it up, and shipping is paid. They get free return shipping back to the lab Our Eagle Lab will be doing the bulk of this. It will include the bacteria, we call it partial chem, nitrates, nitrites, chlorides, hardness, and then metals. And so our state lab will be doing this. We have a couple of labs up in the UP because the bacteria and the partial chemistry analyses have a very short turnaround time to make sure that they're analyzed by the lab. So we've got 2 labs up in the Upper Peninsula. We'll be doing those. And as we get this rolled out, I said that we've got the website that we're standing up, and our local health partners will be counseling residents on their tests results and informing them of any actions that they may need to take if samples do not come back favorable. And the dashboard will be up on that webpage as well as the portal, along with other information that residents can find and how to read their results. So that's a very quick snapshot.
That would be phase 1, and then the
Phase
hope
1
would be for phase 2.
Yep, we would roll in other parameters, VOCs, PFAS, 1,4-dioxin. We wanted to be able to get this going in the most efficient way possible to get it off the ground. So our expansion would not only be parameters, but to potentially other health department labs and getting more of the funding out. It's 5 million is a very small amount. When we looked at distribution across the state, it was a very small amount when you divide it by 83 counties. We wanted to show success so that the legislature invests in this, and then we can really build something that's really quite robust.
So I guess my question is, if somebody calls me and says, I need my well tested and Eagle won't do it, can I send them to the health department to get it tested for PFAS?
If they not yet, not through this program, Sandy, but
Okay.
Not this program.
if they're very concerned, I would have them call the DHHS hotline. We can talk about where they're at, if they have sources in their area, and then if it looks like it's a major concern, we may be able to figure out something through DHHS to do sampling, or we can help them find the recommended lab list. There's gonna be a lot of
but not this program.
Not in phase 1.
Okay.
Not in phase 1.
Right.
Okay.
And the health departments, we don't have them doing the PFAS testing yet, but DHHS is.
Right. I think there's 2 folds here. Obviously, I know many of you guys have got legislative days planned with your area legislators to talk in the future. This is one of those programs that, I'm pretty sure you can probably see a big need for going forward. Sandy's definitely saying, yes, this needs to be included. So this would be one where I'd say let's, like Sarah says, get it up, get it running, and then make sure that we can have that congressional or the legislative support to be able to do the PFAS sampling on a much more wide basis. All right, other questions on that? Because our original thought was to try to do PFAS testing. So I wanted to make sure you guys knew that there was a slight change in plans on that before you heard about it from someone else. And this just got finalized. It's not actually up and running quite yet, but Sarah, you're anticipating that's going to be launching here shortly, correct?
Right. Well, we had to submit a report to the legislature by April 1st per the appropriation. And what we submitted was a work plan on what this rollout is going to look like. So they have received that. We've also briefed all local health departments on this, and they had their legislative day today. So they should be sharing this information with their representatives as well. But that work plan is in progress, and I have a lot of moving parts, but what we're working on right now is getting that that webpage stood up and the technology working so that people can request those analyses. So we'll be working with DHHS on outreach, and our local health partners will also be doing a lot of outreach with their community members.
All right. So if you've got specific questions or you've got ideas for Sarah, there's her contact information. You've got the slide deck from Kelly, so don't panic if you didn't grab it. But we've got that information there. So, okay, moving along. I think this is back to you then, Sandy.
Okay, I was not at the last meeting, and I know there was a quick thing at the end, kind of like what we're doing this week, I guess, about the public notification. It sounds to me as though we made our recommendation, Eagle made their response back, and I just wanted to make sure that we had a final button this up opportunity, since I wasn't there, to make sure that this can be done. I do hear loudly that Rick and some others in the public notification or in the engaging the public subcommittee have some concerns about it. So I do think this is a work in progress. I think it's especially important that we stay on this given the possible changes to MCLs, because that's going to change quite a bit. So I just wanted to open this up one last time to make sure we've got this, I guess, ready to put this to bed. So Tony, go ahead. You've got your hand up.
Thanks. Excuse me. Thanks, Sandy. Yeah, I just wanted to say, having had an opportunity to review the response, that it's clear that Eagle and MPART have not accepted the fundamental recommendation from the COG. And it's not surprising, though disappointing. And I think that I would just like to draw attention and explain a point that I think keeps either getting missed or brushed aside. Because the fundamental recommendation is that the state should notify, I'm reading it, all potentially exposed individuals as soon as it has sufficient information to commence an investigation of possible PFAS contamination or exposure, and to keep those individuals apprised of all material developments throughout the investigation. Now, there is, I think, concern about reaching out directly to individuals who may be potentially contaminated. And I think that it's great to reach out to local units of government, local health. That's fine, but I think it needs to go further. And I think that's why we made this recommendation. In a lot of the local units, reaching out to them is great, but there are a lot of other local units in which the PFAS polluter actually has connections. And there are other considerations that come into play beyond the protection of public health. And I think that it's also important that individuals have the ability to make their own decisions without having the filter in between of the governmental agencies locally doing that for them. People have a right to know. And I would use as an example a situation, one of the many situations that occurred in Oscoda just a few years ago. A guidance was issued by the Department of Health and Human Services regarding small game and semi-aquatic wildlife in Clark's Marsh. One local official said, "I don't want any more bad news, don't publicize it." As a result, it didn't get publicized. It wasn't even in the Oscoda press. The Detroit Free Press got its hands on it. It was a front page headline story, and it was not just a story about the significance of the advisory. It was also a story about the fact that it was being suppressed and withheld from public dissemination, which gave the MPART two black eyes in the process. So, I'm not sure where this goes next in this body. I think that there may be a better way to deal with this outside of it. But I really think that Eagle is missing the mark there. And instead of focusing on what Eagle doesn't know how to do, we need to focus on what Eagle can do in this realm to move this issue forward. That's my thought. That's the thought I know of a lot of people in my community. And I just feel like we've been spinning our wheels for 2 years on this, and disappointed that that's still the case. So those are my thoughts.
Thanks, Tony. Anyone else have any comments or anything? Mary Blanchard.
Hello. I know at the very end of the last meeting, Abby brought up the fact that COG members might be able to go to their communities and maybe neighboring communities and share information. I know for myself, I did that just as recently as this Valentine's Day when our COG meeting changed to a different day. I went and presented more information at the Holly Village board meeting, including the document for the preventive measures group that is on the COG website. And I just want to confirm with Abby what type of information that they're possibly thinking that we would share.
I think my idea would be to put together a packet of information that you could hand out pieces and parts depending on what kind of venue you were at. So, obviously board meetings different than a neighborhood group is different than a church group, whatever group you might be meeting with, being able to share information on what PFAS is, why testing is important, why you should be concerned about it is going to be much more impactful coming from one of you guys as local citizens or local neighbors or community members than coming from, a statewide education campaign. And so I think that's what we're hoping for is to have a collection of information documents that you guys can, utilize for any event that might come up. So does that answer your question, Mary?
Yep. I guess I will say, though, there has been questions within our community where residents will say, if it's so important, why are you saying it and not somebody from the state?
I mean, yeah. And we do, obviously, we spend a lot of time and effort to try to keep things updated, but that's why I think this group is established, is to help get those kinds of notifications and information out there. So the state can't be everywhere at once, and it's much better messaging coming from your neighbors or you guys as local community leaders than it is necessarily coming from us. If they want a formal presentation, that's one thing, but to hear about it and to know about the importance of it is pretty powerful coming from you guys.
Okay. Lynn, you're next.
Okay. Hi, everybody. In my backyard today, I would say, yeah, I'm disappointed about where we are after 2 years. I think a lot of effort has gone in, and I don't think a lot has changed. I think we've learned some things, and I'm not sure how much we've accomplished. I've been in the position, as Mary has mentioned, of talking to people, and she's right. They will ask that. I've had conversations with people. Some go better than others, but they do wonder. So I would wonder what it would be like for those who are state employees to take our position and see what that's like, because it's not widely known. It's not widely understood. And I was traipsing around one area in Cannon Township that I'm quite sure that there is 1 or 2 sources out there, and you talk to people and you start asking questions and you get mixed responses. It's I don't think it's something you can lean on the citizens to do. I don't think it's something you can lean on us to do. I think we need to get it. We need to get it as part of the law, just like and I'd like to segue to what I would like to see maybe on a future meeting very soon is we need to get laws passed that can actually force these things to get done. I don't know how that happens with an advisory group, but I don't think it's a good idea to be leaning on COG members to accomplish all that. It's something's not working here. The other thing is, again, on the law, I hesitate when Michigan talks about how far ahead they are on things, and they are. I think it's great, like Jerry mentioned, about how they're ahead of the game on some of these things. I love that. However, there are other states that are ahead of us. And I'd love to see us be ahead of everybody on everything. And now I'm dreaming big, but Maine has, I listened to something on NPR and I'll stop because the meeting's almost over, but I would like to see this on the agenda. They talked about how in Maine, they're not accepting these fertilizer sludge pellets anymore from, I think it's Deer Island, Massachusetts, from some kind of waste disposal, processing, whatever. But one of the two states that was mentioned, among others, that does accept these fertilizer pellets that basically puts PFAS back into the farms is Michigan. And I'm like, why are we doing that? We're already dealing with sludge that was put on farms. Why in the world are we accepting? Why can't we step up and make some of these decisions that happen faster than 5-10 years from now? It's just, this isn't a good idea. You know?
If you've
And
got a
like
link
Dave
to
Wynn
that,
is doing.
Lynn, if you've,
I can.
whoops,
Sorry.
Lynn, if you've got a link to the story, send it to me because that's not something I know to be the truth. So let me dig into the facts on that one.
Yeah, please do. It was reputable. It was on NPR, and it was someone who was an expert on this. And I was like, please don't say Michigan. And but other states don't have laws. And like, come on, let's be like Maine. So therefore, I still think we haven't figured out whether we are an advisory group or an action group. It's not completely working here, and I think we need to accept that. But we can support each other from community to community. We can be a support group for each other, but I don't have the answers. But I'm not like, Sandy, I don't feel like it's all buttoned up.
I agree.
I don't mean to be discouraging. And I'm glad for all we have done, but that's the reality I see. So that's it. That was that for a 10-minute lecture.
You did good, Lynn. You did good.
All right,
you held it off to the end. All right.
I did.
Kelly, do you have something? Or are you waving at us, Kelly, to tell us to leave?
No, I'm not. Kind of building off of where Lynn was going or talking about. I've sat in on these meetings for a long time and I listened to both sides. And in the engaging the public meeting, I asked the question. So we asked if we could come to the table with you guys on the public notification to talk about some workable solutions. Prior to the public notification, prior to you guys finalizing your version. And that was denied. So I'm just wondering if you had all of the COG support for that, and maybe what the background for that denial was.
I can say that we've come up with our document. Wasn't the prettiest thing, and it was a lot like making sausage. I think we have given you, from the COG's perspective, from the citizens' perspective, our desire to have notification so that we can be protective of our families, of pregnant women, of all those things that are important. You guys have come back with reasons why you can't do it. And I don't think we need to spin our wheels anymore because I just find it frustrating, as does most of the people on the COG. So I think at that point, you have stated what you can do. We have stated what, as citizens, we think you need to do. And I think maybe it's time that we just get together outside of this and figure out what we can do to move action on this issue and the importance of public notification. That's all we're saying. And so, I mean, if groups want to still get together and hammer out pieces of this and that, I agree Eagle is making moves towards trying to do this better and better. I see that and I recognize that, but I don't want to take up any more COG time fighting this out. 2 years is 2 years. I think we have to try a different approach. And maybe that's not within a citizens advisory group. Maybe that's outside of this group and we try something else. So that's what I would say to that. So.
Thank you.
Yep. So Daniel Brown, I'm going to give you the last word because you're always the voice of reason for me.
Oh no, now the pressure's on. No, I agree with what Sandy just said, and I think what I'm hearing from everybody is that there are really multiple threads that I think are worth following in different ways, and I think this is at the heart of a lot of the discussions that we've been having recently about the role of the COG and you know, where do we go from here. So I won't beat a dead horse on all of that, but I think, you know, Sandy's comments and you know, the things Tony were talking about, I think get to that. You know, I do what I'm hearing generally now is that there is this need for and want of COG members to be sort of neighborly educators and notifiers within the community. And I think that there is a role for us in that way, but it is not a replacement for official notification. And I think that is really critical for the reasons that Mary talked about, that, you know, the official word has to come from the official level. So we can help build awareness. We can help with things like, you know, the PFAS 101 and can support river walkers, and we can do all of those good things. And I think many of us are happy to help out in those ways. But, you know, when it relates to notification of contamination and potential risks to public health or, you know, environmental damage, that those official notifications really need to come from the official level. So, you know, where we tackle that, I think Sandy was touching on a lot of that. I think there's several ways forward that we can consider. But yeah, I do agree. I think we're at the point where, you know, we need to get, you know, critical mass of COG members together outside of these COG meetings, just so that we're not taking up state officials' time, and you know, we can talk about how the COG fits into sort of a larger scheme of things.
Thank you, Dan, for that. I did not mean to suggest that I would make you guys be doing public notification for public health responses. So, yeah, my intentions were to be able to give you guys general information that as you wanted to be able to do those neighborly outreach, that's fine, but not in any way trying to supplement or replace public notification. That was not my intent. So sorry for the if that's the way it sounded, I didn't mean that to come across quite that way.
All right. Well, with that, it's 8:10. I would say if people have ideas for May and June, shoot us some emails, give us some thought. It sounds like we will hopefully have more on Eat Safe Fish and PFAS coming up in May.
And Sandy, you wanted to potentially move the May date a week.
Yeah, would that work for people? I know there's a large group of us from GeoPan that are actually heading to Lansing on the 9th. And so I wasn't sure if moving it a week would work or not. I wonder if we could do a doodle poll on that or something to get people's ideas.
That's Sandy, this is Tony, probably a good idea because there's also something the following week too.
in DC for
On the
some of us.
16th.
That's right,
Yeah.
yeah. So
How
let's do a
about-
doodle poll and see.
Okay.
It's a busy time.
Or if
Um,
everybody here can just text us the 16th or the 23rd, which Tuesday would be better, we can just do it that way.
That'll work.
So if you just want to drop it in the chat before you sign off, we can tally that on our end and see what looks like the winner. So that would be May 16th or May 23rd, both Tuesday nights. So if you can do that before you leave, and I'll give Sandy the last word.
All right. Well, go out, enjoy some 70-degree weather. This is your week of summer. With the weather the way it's been going, who knows if we'll get any more summer after this. So go and enjoy it now while you can and put in those dates. So, all right, everyone. Good to see you.
Yeah. Happy spring. Enjoy the weather.
Bye.
Bye,
Okay,
Sandy.
see you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.